You ready for us to kick this off?
Yeah, absolutely. It's my first time doing Substack Live. It's pretty exciting. And we have a pretty juicy topic lined up. So,
Yeah, this is a heavy topic, a big one. I'm excited. We're going to dive into it. Let me begin framing the conversation today as I call this a just citizens concept discussion. All right, and I'll kick this off and do a little bit on your bio and kind of how we connected. Uh, we live in times of unprecedented crises. Every day, headlines bring reports of a new disaster, flooding, heat waves, political polarization, AI driven job losses, war, authoritarianism, and more. We could go on. What if I told you that all these problems, and indeed most of our planetary crises, stem from common root causes? That's the thesis we're going to discuss today with my guest and friend, Akhil Puri. Akhil, you write the Substack, How Shall We Live? Uh, how long have you been on Substack?
I've been doing this for about a little over a year now.
Okay, a little over
Yeah,
a year.
started writing in October last year.
And I found you not long after that. So I'll mention that story perhaps in just a minute. Let's go to your bio. I want to give an introduction of you. You've shared some stuff about your professional and educational background. So here goes. Akhil is an ex-climate tech entrepreneur turned writer and educator on the Metacrisis and systems change. In his own startup, he built a crowdfunding platform for green projects, developed solar rooftop projects, and a solar energy marketplace. His experience building the startup led him to conclude that climate change is a symptom of the problem and not the problem itself, with the deeper problems being systemic, be it economic, cultural, and even spiritual. With degrees from top engineering and business schools in India and experience leading multi-million-dollar businesses, he brings a multi-dimensional lens to the issues we find ourselves mired in. He now lives in Toronto, Canada, where he is working to get more people actively engaged in solving our civilizational challenges. Anything you want to add to that intro, Akhil?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. It is difficult for me to figure out how to describe what I'm doing now because I'm involved in so many different projects which are in nascent stages. So I think writer and educator is pretty good for now.
Okay, excellent. Um, I had a political awakening in the summer of 2022. I was traveling outside the United States. I'm in the Rocky Mountains, but I was over in the UK and saw Boris Johnson as the Prime Minister of the UK fall from power. It caused me to ask questions about how do we get to a better political place as so many things are happening around the globe. And so while I'm a finance professional, I'm the author of the Common Sense Papers on Substack. I'm the founder of an organization, a nonprofit social welfare organization called Common Sense 250, which is centered on citizens in pursuit of happiness. And we're working on a movement that we call Just Citizens, rooted in civic virtue and democratic renewal. I found one of your essays on the Metacrisis, a long and brilliant essay, really back a year ago, November 2024. I digested the essay and a lot of the systemic issues, some of the political things that I've been seeing fed into or were captured in the narrative you were telling. And with that, I got into the comment section and I picked up a comment that looked like it was coming from your dad. And I thought, this looks like a father who's cheering on his son. I'm like, this is so cool. I don't see that on Substack very often or much at all. And I thought, this is somebody I want to dig into and, make a connection, reach out with a DM, say hello. And over the last year, we've had kind of a monthly or every other month video conference call after our first introduction and have carried on a conversation about what's happening geopolitically and in the spirit of the Metacrisis, what's happening for good and bad as we look at the world from our different lenses in two different countries in North America. So I'm thrilled that we get to have this conversation, having built a friendship over the past year. I've given the framing. Anything you want to add before I dive into the first question?
No, just want to thank you for bringing back some warm memories. It's my family has been tremendously supportive in this endeavor, and my father is usually the first commenter on a lot of the stuff that I share. And it's also a testament to the power of the internet. Usually we're just hearing about how the internet is driving polarization and fake news, etc. But a lot of good things come out of it as well. So, yeah, thanks for that framing and intro.
All right, this is perfect. Let's jump into what's going to be a full discussion today. Lead question. Please explain the concept of a metacrisis.
Okay. That's a big one. And you added some framing in the beginning of the call, right? Like you mentioned, we have n number of crises unfolding in our world today: climate change, AI risk, war, polarization, plastic pollution, what have you. Um, at the surface of it, it looks like these are many different crises which are unfolding and they're happening at the same time. But the metacrisis thesis is that these are not really separate crises. These are interconnected crises which are mutually reinforcing. And they share some common systemic root causes: cultural, economic, spiritual, political. And taken together, they pose a civilizational risk of unprecedented nature. We have not dealt with anything like this ever before. So I'll expand on a few of those things that I said, like the interconnected and mutually reinforcing nature of these crises, for instance. So if you look at fake news, it makes it far harder for us to solve climate change. And then climate change leads to a lot of natural disasters, drop in food production, etc. That leads to massive migration. Migration leads to increased xenophobia because people fear scarcity and people who seem different from them, and that leads to an increase in fake news again. Right, like so these crises they end up reinforcing each other. Um, and then the other part of the metacrisis thesis is that unless we act at the systemic root causes which are leading to these crises, we are going to be constantly facing this problem of firefighting, and we'll just keep on dealing with new problems one after the other. Um, in Greek mythology, there is a monster called the Hydra, which has many heads. And basically, what happens with the Hydra is if you chop off one of its heads, two heads grow to take its place. And that's kind of what the metacrisis is like. Um, Concrete example of this would be like like one of the root causes of our problems is our economic system, and that system led to big tobacco lying about the health effects of smoking many decades ago. Then it led to the fossil fuel lobby lying about climate change. Then it led to social media companies lying about the effects of social media on teenage health and polarization. And now we have AI and robotics, which are leading to runaway effects in the world. So we keep on creating new crises because we are not addressing the root problems.
I appreciate that framing, that overview. There's a lot to unpack with this. And so maybe I want to go to kind of, what really ups the stakes of making this feel so critical, such a huge issue. Talk to me then about, what is the civilization risk?
Yeah. So we as humanity, we have faced plenty of problems before, right? Like we have had the bubonic plagues, we have had the world wars, we have had the Great Recession. It's not like we are new to challenges. The real problem over here is that we've never faced so many of them together, and especially not at a time when the world is so interconnected and we are all dependent on each other, right? So a good example of why that is a problem is the COVID crisis. So when the pandemic hit, it basically started in one part of the world, but basically turned into a global catastrophe. And supply chains everywhere were affected. Like China is the manufacturing hub of the world, and everything came to a screeching halt over there. And cumulative inflation since 2020 has been about 25%. It's really broken people's backs, right? So now, and COVID was one crisis. It was a big crisis, but it was still one crisis.
It's at least 25%. I think you pulled a conservative number. Some of us are in the 30s, and certain categories are 50 and 60% inflation. But you're right; it's been painful watching the supply chain, not rebuild itself in a way that's cost friendly or affordable. So keep going.
Yeah, absolutely right. Like you're right. It is at least 25%. Um, Now, like I was saying, that is just one crisis, and right now we have multiple of these crises unfolding together, and some of them are reaching tipping points now. We had a report about the Great Barrier Reefs, and how global warming has kind of pushed them over the edge very recently. So these crises are reaching a breaking point, and when you stack multiple of them together. Uh, at a time when the world is connected, we'll have cascading impacts which can lead to massive suffering for hundreds of millions of people, potentially billions of people. Um, and I'll give you some examples of how that might happen, right? But if you look at just the ecological crises, we saw the LA wildfires earlier this year. A few years back, we had the Australian wildfires where like 1 billion animals perished. Right now, inequality has increased so much that 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Uh, Smaller personal examples. A few weeks back, I met a woman at a networking event who got asthma from wildfire smoke 3,000 kilometers away. Right, like so there are these.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
ouch.
Yeah, yeah. So it's really crazy, right? You see all of these dots out there in the world, and the way they connect, right? Like so, um, if you look at climate change, that is one behemoth of a crisis itself. But what people are less aware of is something called the planetary boundary framework. Climate change, as large as it is just one ecological crisis. We have ocean acidification happening at the same time. We have soil degradation happening at the same time due to excessive use of fertilizers. We have freshwater resources getting depleted at a rate faster than we can use them. So, as a consequence of some of these things, the UN predicts that we are going to exceed our freshwater supply by 40% by 2030. 40% of the agricultural land in the world has already been degraded to some capacity because of the use of industrial agriculture. Uh, because of weather effects and food scarcity and water scarcity, it is predicted that we'll have about 1.2 billion refugees by the year 2050.
Whoa,
Right?
that's a big number. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And when I share that stat with some people, they think that, okay, 2050 is still far away. But it's not like 1.2 billion people are all just going to migrate in 2050. It's a cumulative number. We're going to have tens of millions of people migrating every year. And if you look at Europe, just because of the wars in the Middle East, maybe 5 or 6 million people have migrated to Europe. And with just 5 or 6 million people, we have all the problems that we are having in Europe with respect to the anti migrant sentiment and xenophobia. Uh, what's going to happen when 1.2 billion people migrate, right? Like when they don't have enough food for themselves. And you couple this with the job losses from AI and robotics driven automation, suddenly societal order starts collapsing, right? Because people, when they're faced with so much scarcity, uh, they're going to riot. uh, this leads to the rise of strongman politics, which we already see in the world today. Uh, you know, uh, about 70% of the world's population right now does not live in democracies. Like there was a time when democracy was the dominant form of organization in the world, but democracy is in recession now. So our ability to deal with these complex challenges that we are facing is going down at the same time as the complexity of these challenges is going up. And as a result, we'll have a cascading domino effect from these crises, which will lead to, like I said, suffering for potentially hundreds of millions, if not billions of people.
Wow. I'm processing, how many tough things to think about you've ticked off in the civilization risk section. Clearly, I've seen the political winds, really shift as part of the immigration message has played itself out, through the 2024 election and the current year with a real policy change that most people have not experienced in their lifetimes. It's a bumpy road. It's not going smoothly. But we're just one, we're a major superpower in the US, but with the number of migrants, the potential effects of weather, food, systemic issues hitting people on the move trying to, survive. And survival is one question. it's going to come up, in this conversation. But ultimately, we don't just want to survive. We want human flourishing. We want the best of our potential opportunity, our moment here on Earth. Living our best life. So with all that, you pointed to the fact that there are some common root causes that the climate was kind of a symptom. It wasn't just, okay, we have a climate problem, boom. There are common root causes that are bundling so many things together, making them hard to approach, hard to solve. Things are festering, like you said. We're putting out fires, but we don't really seem to know like how to extinguish the fact that the fires are igniting, repeatedly over and over again. So, what are the common root causes that we can talk about today?
Yeah, good question. So before I get into the causes, like let me present a lens for looking at the world, right? Like, and we'll use that model to unpack some of those root causes. Right? Like, so let's say at the base layer we have the biophysical reality, like the world as it exists today, natural ecosystems, the minerals that we have, our nature as living organisms, the evolutionary pressures, etc. One layer that we can add on top of that is a metaphysics or worldview, religion, spirituality, what we think like gives life meaning and purpose. One layer above that would be our culture, myths, or stories that we tell, and what we celebrate as we're doing. All of this gives shape to what we end up valuing as human beings, whether we think humility is a value worth having, truth telling is a value worth having, etc. Ideally, we try to build systems which enshrine these values that we hold. A lot of the times, the systems don't really reflect the values that we would want to have. And these systems and institutions that we build, they lead to certain incentives that we have in the world, right? And as Charlie Munger was fond of saying, like, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. So the incentives that we have as living organisms lead to the actions that we end up taking in the world. So with that framework, one way of looking at what is happening in the world right now is that it's a problem of misaligned incentives, which is leading to difficulty in us coordinating in solving the problems that we have. The main misaligned incentive that we have is an economic one right now. So if you look at our economic system, there is just one metric that it chases. It's growth, growth, growth at all costs, and which in itself would not be such a problem if it wasn't just a short-term and non-holistic measure. What do I mean by that? Right? Like, so companies and their CEOs, they're rewarded for how their stock performs quarter on quarter, right? And that doesn't have much to do with how much the company is adding to human welfare. So again, example of Facebook, for instance, it's widely known that it has had a polarizing effect on society. Fake news is rampant there, but that is not something that Facebook gets punished for. Facebook is rewarded for engagement on the platform. And again, it's widely known that outrage and clickbait are what drive engagement the most. So, if you are Mark Zuckerberg, you're going to prioritize for engagement even at the cost of fake news, because that is what you're rewarded for.
The attention economy. Well said.
The attention. Yeah. Yeah. So, and the thing is, it's not like you can recognize this incentive and you can escape from it. So even if you would want to take the right action, you're going to get punished for it. A prime example of this was with United Healthcare. So, last year, in a very tragic incident, Luigi Mancini allegedly shot Brian Thompson, who is the CEO, which is like something which most people are aware of. What is less known is that this year United Healthcare actually tried to change its policies and start passing more claims. And what ended up happening when they which would be a good thing, right? Like, you think that more people are going to get access to insurance. But what ended up happening was that United Healthcare got sued by its shareholders because they said that if you pass more health claims, your profits are going to go down, and like that is not good for shareholders. So, even if you see the trap, you see the incentives and try to do the right thing, it is difficult to escape. So our economic system and misaligned incentives over there are a big part of the problem.
Let me jump in here a second. One of our live viewers, we're so grateful for the live viewers who are joining us today. Grateful for those who are going to watch this on replay. You've mentioned the economic system, which clearly, most people vote their pocketbook. That's front and center. The political system feeds into this. That will weave into our conversation. But, one of the great viewers on here has mentioned that sortition is an alternate form of kind of political choice making or political selection of representation and giving people voice, and just the nature of how we've constructed the system, leads to certain incentives about, how are donors capturing political system to their economic advantage, et cetera, et cetera. So love the comment coming in. We've got multiple systems at play: economic, political. You've mentioned cultural, spiritual dimensions, and how we get to what we value. These are interwoven in ways that are powerful, very difficult to dislodge when they themselves are creating this loop of incentives that's leaving us, in the eye of the metacrisis, shall we say, in the eye of the hurricane, where it's tough to get to a place that offers more stability and breakthrough solutions for the types of things that a lot of, smart and informed people can see coming and can see as the difficulty that we face, both in local communities and humanity at large. So continue with your root cause, and then we'll get to the next question.
Yeah. But yeah, sortation is something that could help. We have, other economics, other political systems as well, citizens' assemblies. There are multiple other alternatives out there, and we'll cover them later in the conversation, I'm sure. But yeah, so the economic system is one problem, and the economic system, the way we approach it, is a special case of the general tendency that we have as human beings, like to think short term and non holistically. So that is just a general biological wiring that we have. We haven't evolved to think over such long term time scales and deal with such complex systems and be able to predict what will happen over the course of many decades and second and third order effects. So that is a challenge. But coming to the larger systemic parts, when we look at our culture and the stories that are prevalent, when we look at what is a life worth living, what do we celebrate as a culture? We celebrate power, wealth, status. We go to a party and we typically ask people, what is it that you do? And everybody understands that what is actually being asked is only one dimension, like what do you do, like in the economy, what is the job that you do? And suddenly if somebody says that, like, oh, they're a vice president at Goldman Sachs, like it's quite natural that you suddenly like, oh, this person has succeeded, like it's kind of worth respecting this person, right? Like, so we have those subconscious scripts automatically running in our mind. It leads to kind of this keeping up with the Joneses mentality that we have, like this tendency to compete and accumulate. But to me, like all of these are very critical levers, but all of these are downstream of what I was mentioning as a metaphysics and worldview, right? So we have there's like two main worldviews which I think are at war right now. One is which says that man is master of the universe, and nature is there for our extraction and domination. That life is a competition. The strong take what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. Right, like, and that is the predominant worldview that we are operating under right now. Our institutions and our incentives are reflecting that worldview, and that is a major problem. On the other hand, like, you can have a worldview that we are interwoven in the web of life, and we are connected to each other, and we are interdependent on each other. And if we had that, like, a lot of our current problems would go away. But as things stand right now, we are alienated from ourselves. We have this productivity culture where we approach ourselves as a project to constantly be optimized. We are constantly distracted by social media. Our lives are so busy. We don't ourselves know what we want, and how do we approach like this question of what makes a life worth living. Uh, our social connections are fraying because of, again, polarization and this culture of convenience where we want everything at the click of a button, and like even a little friction of going to a store and talking to somebody, it's not seen as being worth it. Our supply chains have disconnected us so far from means of basic subsistence. Like most of us don't know how to grow food. Like if there was a major crisis tomorrow, like most of us would be dead within a week. Yeah. So we basically, so this is a crisis of separation from ourselves, from each other, and from nature. And so I think that is what lies at the core of these crises, and that's what I mean by the spiritual dimension of the crisis.
Yeah, and just to jump in there, or be a sounding board back. I see it in so many places. I mean, I watch, lots of, I review lots of data in the United States, and cultural trends, things. We've had a drop in church or religious participation, and it's
Hmm.
coincided with the rise of the internet and information everywhere. And so there's still spiritual worldviews, but less attachment to perhaps specific moral frameworks. And within that, you see kind of this rise of nihilism. This young generation sees a world where things are, difficult to afford, and the political system is messed up in a way that doesn't seem to want to solve problems that people are voicing and caring about. Power flips hands, but it ends up serving kind of entrenched interests. And at the end of
Yeah.
that, I read articles, and just read one last week about someone who'd gone to Washington, D.C., dined in J.D. Vance's house, met with other, key conservative leaders, and came away interviewing young people within the Washington power ecosystem, saying, wow, too many of these people want to burn it all down, that they can't see the system itself, the political governing system, reaching a point where there's more of this optimism, more of this interconnectedness, the ability to really wrap our minds around tough problems of meaning, and then ultimately decide through a democratic way, how do we tackle those problems and do what is good for, human wellness, human flourishing, you know, within the boundary constraints that we have with life on Earth.
Yeah.
So anyway, I see, that narrative, that sense of meaning feeding downstream to our politics, our economic choices. There's multiple layers here, and you unpack that really well. Um, I'm
Yeah.
looking now. I'm looking now at asking the question, that we've had a lot of these, issues. These incentives have been working for decades, even
Mhm.
centuries. Why is this happening now in the way you talk about the meta crisis?
Yeah. You just need to give me a second because of the way the sun is streaming in. I need to kind of adjust where I'm sitting. Uh,
All
like I said,
good.
first Substack live conversation. We got some logistics hassles to deal with. Uh, Sorry. So yeah, like you were saying, yeah, we've had this incentive structures and cultural and biological tendencies for a long time now. Um, you know, the reason they're happening right now is these problems are happening right now. It's in some ways we are victims of our own success. Uh, you know, um, we have had tremendous success in the technology that we have invented, which has led to our lives getting better on multiple dimensions. Right? Like we're living longer than ever. We can cure more diseases than ever. Food production has gone up exponentially. Um, and this was all well and good for a while. Like the Earth is a pretty big place, and it could hold a lot of us. But just to give you some stats, our population has gone from 2 billion to 8 billion, 8 billion plus now in the last 120 years. Uh, Electricity usage has increased 440 times in roughly the same time period. The amount of materials that we use for construction, they've gone up from 30 billion tons to 100 billion tons in the roughly the last 5 decades. Uh, the biggest one, when we look at energy use, we end up using about 84 billion barrels worth of oil equivalent every year. Um, and each barrel of oil is capable of producing work equal to like 4.5 years of human labor. So you do the math, like we roughly have about 400 billion fossil fuel saves working for us full time right now. So for each one of us, there are like 50 people like equivalent working all the time. So human civilization like operates at a massive scale, which we can't usually comprehend.
You say that like you can anticipate the AI robots that are coming to serve our various needs with that energy supplied behind the scenes. But keep going.
Yeah. If only they would. Uh, 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 so, like, civilization operates at a massive scale, and when we had a smaller footprint, it was not such a problem. But given this exponential growth, we've started hitting the limits of our planet, right? Like, so we are in overshoot. I mentioned the planetary boundaries earlier. Like there's also just the term overshoot. Like we are consuming resources 70% faster than the Earth can replenish them. So that is a major challenge now. Uh, we are doing this at a time when we have a global supply chain as well, right? Like so, it leads to like great like just in time shipping. Amazon uh, like doesn't even have next day delivery now in some cases. Like it's same day delivery. But it also leads to a lot of fragility, and so if you have problems in one part of the world, they'll again cascade everywhere else. So Russia and Ukraine, for instance, like they're responsible for I think a quarter of the world's wheat supply. So the war over there has definitely had an impact on the cost of food, right? Um, the other thing that has happened is because of this exponentially fast technological growth, our institutions have not been able to keep up. Right, like the complexity of our civilization has increased at a rate greater than the capacity of us as individuals to make sense of some of these things, and also for our institutions to be able to respond to some of these things. It's a joke in tech circles, like whenever these Senate hearings happen with the CEOs of tech companies, right? Like you can see the senators struggling with even trying to explain the basic concepts of social media, right? Like so, regulation is definitely not able to keep up with it. Um, at the same time, social media is fragmenting our attentions, like we just mentioned, right? Like so. Somebody just told me that earlier, when somebody told you that you have the attention span of a goldfish, it was an insult because the average attention span was 12 seconds or something, and the goldfish's attention span was 9 seconds. Now, apparently, it's a compliment because human attention spans are down to 8 seconds. So,
Ooh, not on Substack though. Substack is full of readers. This is the long
yeah.
attention span zone. Compliments to all those watching us live. But yeah, technology is having a real effect on this. This generation that's been raised on handheld devices. It's a mass experiment happening in real time with young people trying to figure out what does this mean for human cognition and the way we process and interact. What does it mean for the interpersonal relationships that are so critical to human enjoyment? Okay. With that, you've you've answered the question. Why is this happening now, or the nature of the scale that we're dealing with, and the interconnectedness that's amplifying things fast through the chain. It sounds like a lot. I want to ask the question: how did you come to these conclusions about the Metacrisis? What has been your journey?
Huh. When it began. So, no, honestly, if you had asked me, if you had told me 10 years back that I would care about any of these things, I would have honestly asked, like, Joe, pass on whatever you're smoking. Right? Like, uh, I honestly didn't care about any of these issues at all. I was back in India. I had a comfortable job, lived in a 3-bedroom place by myself. Like, India, it's pretty easy to get domestic help. Very comfortable, very apolitical. And then it so happened that 2016, we had a crazy heat wave. Temperatures went 10 degrees higher than I had ever seen in my lifetime in the city I was in. Uh, at the same time, the lakes in the city started getting so polluted that they actually caught on fire. And this basically just led to visions of the apocalypse for me, because like, what's water doing catching fire, right? So I started reading a lot more at the same time. I watched Planet Earth too, like the BBC's. It's an excellent series on just the beauty and complexity of nature, but also what we are doing to it. Um, so all of this brought home for me what's happening with the climate crisis and ecological crisis in general. Um, when I first like grasped the implications, I wanted to run. I'm like, this is too big. Not going to be able to do anything about it. How do I save myself? Like, can I move to another country? Will it be okay if I earn like tens of or hundreds of millions of dollars? Every time ran the math on all of that, and just concluded that it's impossible. There is no running away. This crisis is everywhere. It's going to affect all of us, no matter how much money we have. People misguidedly think that if they're billionaires or they'll have bunkers that they're going to be able to survive this. Like, no, you basically eroding the life-sustaining substrate which we all depend on. So a bunker is not going to help you, right? Like, so I was very grudging conclusion that I must turn around and do something about this. And I started with this crowdfunding voluntary or carbon offset platform, and it was the first of its kind in India. And 6 months in, I realized two things: one, that offsets were a scam, and second, and second, that nobody really cared about climate change. It seemed too distant. Like, the notion of what I was saying was too absurd. People repeatedly asked me, like, what's in it for me? And if I said survival, they used to look at me like I'm a lunatic. And they said, like, this seems like charity, and which shows that concept of separation that we have, that we don't realize how dependent we are on rest of the environment. And like, if these things continue on the trajectory that they're continuing, the environment will be fine. It will eventually stabilize, right? Like, it's our civilization which is at stake. So we have very mistaken notions over there. Yeah, yeah.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer. I've got a few quotes that I pulled out of your essays that I really love, and I want to jump in with one right now. There's a question you ask in one of your essays: why is a species as smart as ours failing to solve its own problems? It just, it just puts the mirror in front of us and saying, like, we're captured in systems that we wonder, are we even, big enough if we join together to make a difference, to have the impact that we need? Or smart people can see it. Once we're educated, we can start to look at the world through a different lens. But even at that, do I feel powerless, where I just kind of hunker down and go back to what's in it for me in the small scale stuff? So given that context, given how overwhelming so much of this sounds, I want to ask the question: what's the way out of this? Start to sketch that for me in this next few minutes.
Yeah. I mean, it can definitely sound very overwhelming when we try to put all of these crises together. And like you said, we have systems that we are trapped in. So the first thing is basically like, you just really got to breathe and acknowledge that it is really big. It is natural to have a reaction of fear and overwhelm. And one of the things that is most needed for us is to develop this capacity to sit with discomfort and fear. And these kind of crises can send our nervous system in fight or flight mode. And that's kind of what is happening with a lot of powerful people as well, right? Like, even somebody who has hundreds of billions of dollars. One, the problem is big even for them. Second, they have been brought up in a culture of fear, and with this script of, like, each man for himself, and life is a competition. So even when they think that, okay, I want to do something good, they think that somebody else will outcompete them, and all their efforts will be for nothing. So one of the most critical things that we have to do is change those cultural narratives within ourselves, right? So yes, humans have a tendency to compete, but we are also a very social and very cooperative species. We haven't built this, planet terraforming civilization without being able to coordinate and cooperate with each other. So, and once we kind of do some inner work in terms of therapy or figuring out what kind of subconscious scripts drive us, we can start to change some of these scripts. So that I think is a very, very critical part of whatever comes next.
You hit two of my favorite C words: coordinate, cooperate. The third one I always bundle in there is collaborate. Uh,
Mm.
so collaboration, cooperation, coordination. That's a bundled power of tools in the way we
Yeah,
frame and think about these things. Keep going.
yeah, yeah. The other thing to realize is that the situation is not as bad as it might seem when you first hear of these things, because people have been talking about these problems for decades. So a lot of solutions are actually in the works. They're just not mainstream, because most of our traditional media is corporate controlled. It serves existing power structures. Plus, there isn't money in nuance, right? Like it's like you require a substantial attention span and ability to stay with complexity to deal with some of these things. So traditional media doesn't really cover that. So it's worth recognizing that the solutions are out there. Like they'll just require a bit of uh, self study and digging into uh, not as unusual places anymore. Thankfully, there are people on YouTube and Substack who have started talking about these things and started educating people. Um, Third, I would say you know one reason one reason we get overwhelmed by these problems is because we tend to look at the global nature of them, and we look at climate change and we're like, oh, 40 billion tons worth of emissions, and like I'm just one person. What am I supposed to do? Uh, the key there is realizing that all of these problems, while they affect all of us, actions need to be taken on them locally. So, you know, 40 billion tons worth of emissions are made up by each individual house, each factory, each car which is being run. So, implementing a lot of these solutions will happen locally. So, I might not have the power to influence what USA does or India does or Canada does, but I can definitely take action at a Toronto level, right? Like, so break down the problem, pick up the piece that you think you are at a level that you can influence. Somebody who has like tens of millions of dollars, they can possibly act at a larger level, right? But doesn't mean that you can't really do anything in this crisis. Um, so yeah, the other thing I would say is that once you kind of start educating yourself about the solutions that are out there, you need to make some of these conversations go mainstream, right? Need to start talking to your friends, family. You need to like this conversation is a great example of getting this message to the broader public, because that is how culture and stories change, right? So when once the alternatives are being built and we start talking about them, they get cultural legitimacy. It leads to more policies being enacted which are favorable to these alternatives, which leads to them scaling up even more people joining it, and so you have a bit of a snowball effect over there. So uh, momentum has its own charm.
I love your answer. You've ticked off multiple parts of how we get to potentially a way out of the things that are the forecast that looks very concerning, very dire, related to the Metacrisis. This bundle of issues that's making it hard to um, get to better human flourishing, but the issues we're dealing with are very much rooted in the systems we're actually running. So the problems are not fixing themselves; they're getting worse as we go. I want to read a paragraph that I loved. I pulled out of one of your essays that fits right in a summary fashion of what you just said. Getting out of this requires a two-part shift: building better systems that make life work for people and telling a radically better story about what's possible. But these two tasks are not equal. The stories we tell are the root. The systems we build are the fruit. To change our world, we must first change the stories that shape it. So I'm delighted we're having a conversation like this and hearing more people, have similar conversations through the great technology that allows us to learn and problem solve. So with that, let's jump to what alternatives, to present systems are you most excited about?
Yeah, so many actually. You know, the first one that I'll focus on, people are reconceptualizing what economics is, what the purpose of an economy should be. Right now, we have a very GDP and growth obsessed economy. Kate Raworth, she's an Oxford economist, she's come up with this framework called donut economics, which puts human and planetary flourishing at the center of whatever civilization should be chasing. So basically, so she sets a floor and a ceiling for what our economy should be doing, the constraints under which it should operate. So, and at the ceiling are the planetary boundaries that I had mentioned earlier, so that we must respect the fact that the planet can only support a certain level of lifestyle, given the number of people that we are. Um, and at the floor, it says that we need to have dignified living for everybody. Like, you need to have education, healthcare, affordable housing for everyone. So it sets a very nice boundary and goal for what humanity should be doing. There are pilots running in Europe. There is a Donut Economics Action Lab in Toronto as well. We're figuring out how to, start building companies or passing policies which focus on this framework of economics. Um, there is a movement called bioregionalism. So, one of the problems that we have is our global footprint of our supply chain. We get, I think, mangoes from Mexico and dates from California, and whatnot from pineapples from Hawaii, and like we are no longer restricted to what is available in our local geography. So bioregionalism is a movement to actually build more resilient, robust regional supply chains and businesses which respect ecological limits. How do we organize ourselves around that? So people are running pilots around like how an economy can actually be compatible with our ecological reality. So that is a great movement as well. On the front of politics, digital democracy and citizens' assemblies are gaining a lot of momentum. So in Taiwan, there was a digital revolution a few years back. There's now a minister of digital democracy. There is a software called Polis, which helps get public input into what decisions people should take. Ireland and Paris have implemented citizens' assemblies on critical issues, including climate change. So there are alternate models which are being developed. So
That's huge for me.
yeah,
A big shout out for citizens assemblies. That's part of the movement that I'm working on through Common Sense 250 and Just Citizens. That when people get together under good information, having the opportunity to share their voice without the, partisan or other dynamics that are capturing kind of the way representatives tend to vote and comport themselves in public audience. There's a much more interesting synthesis of ideas, building high consensus ideas that are really good for
yeah,
society, both locally and at large.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm very excited to see what happens. What you build with Just Citizens. We have similar movements happening in Toronto as well. We have a very large, civic tech body over here, people building software for better democracy. Um, the last one I would mention lies around the inner transformation, the inner narratives part of this crisis. So earlier, the tool that we had for healing from our cultural narratives or childhood trauma, which leads us to have this competitive and power is the only truth dynamic. Like the only tool that we used to have is like talk therapy. Now there are a lot of advancements. We have techniques like Vipassana. It's actually an ancient technique. It was used by Gautam Buddha to reach enlightenment, and it helps regulate your nervous system and like helps you break out of these cycles of constantly craving for more power and more material things.
Say it again. Vipassana.
Vipassana.
Vipassana. You've got
Yeah.
the Indian, yeah, it rolls off your
Yeah.
tongue much faster than mine. Uh, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
ancient yet needed in modern form.
Yeah, absolutely. And it has like 450 centers across the globe. They train like hundreds of thousands of people every year. Absolutely life changing. We have internal family systems therapy, which helps. Uh, the thesis there is that our psyche is kind of broken into multiple parts, which are uh, at odds with each other quite often, and so there's a therapy system over there which can help you kind of have a more unified whole and be more integrated. And as those parts get more integrated, then you automatically tend to be a more pro-social cooperative human being. There's of course a lot of psychedelic research as well. There's in terms of dealing with trauma that people are facing. So exciting developments in like multiple spheres that impact this crisis.
Yeah, we learn more and more about the brain as science evolves, and our neuroplasticity, ways that we can evolve, hopefully in positive ways, better than the issues and traumas that naturally are going to afflict us in life with its
Yeah.
unique forces. Okay, you mentioned at the top of that list of things you're excited about, donut economics. I've heard that term. I've come across that. It's challenging to think about how can our economic system evolve away from some of the entrenched models that are governing in different countries, but clearly a money and banking system that's fairly pervasive among those that are democratic leaning societies, and they're used throughout the globe. Tell me about maybe why donut economics. I've heard terms like degrowth, green growth, post growth. Some terms resonate, some don't. The implications are varied. Give me a little more why donut economics.
Yeah. Great question. So the reason I like donut economics, right, like it puts human and planetary flourishing right at the center, versus the system that we have right now. It is just growth for the sake of growth, right? Like it's like we get headlines like, oh, there's going to be a recession and you're going to grow less than 1%, or the economy is going to contract, and it just automatically assumed like that the economy growing is a good thing and the economy contracting is a bad thing. Uh, Simon Kuznets, who's the guy who came up with the concept of GDP, he himself said that GDP is scarcely a measure of a nation's and its people's well-being. So he just said like it's a measure of how much you're producing, like it's a system of ledger and balances. It's got nothing. There's no correlation with
Will you pause there 1 second? My mind is wanting to reframe to that sentence you just gave me about growth and needing to see, growth is a good thing, contraction a bad thing. You've talked about planetary boundaries. When you run a monetary system that is based on debt, and money creation is all founded on debt, when you reach what's kind of like a debt boundary, like we're not sure how much debt the system can support based on how much income and profit exists for those valuations. If you're overly indebted, you got to grow your way. You got to have growth, or that sucking sound on the financial side is going to be really painful in the reset. And it may be a debt crisis that does ultimately allow us to rethink aspects of the economic system. But debt boundaries really is helping drive that GDP must go higher. Growth must be there, or it's it's a very painful answer for those who have economic choices to make to get around
yeah.
an over indebtedness, throughout the economy and the interwovenness of that. Carry on with the GDP remarks you're
Yeah.
making.
Yeah. I mean, it is a pretty absurd system that we have built for ourselves at the economic front, but that's a s- whole 2 hour conversation on its own. In the challenges with debt-based economies. But yeah, so GDP is not a good measure of human well-being, and we can see it very easily with just the example of healthcare, right? Like if you go to a doctor, the GDP goes up because you have spent on healthcare, but like you might be going to the doctor because you have kidney failure. So how is that correlated with human well-being? Or you take another example. Let's say what would be good for the environment and for general population well-being at large is if we had a really good public transport infrastructure. But that's probably going to cost less than having cars for every individual. So if you build great public infrastructure, GDP is going to grow less than it would if everybody bought cars. So there's no correlation between human well-being and what the GDP number suggests. I like what we have in Bhutan. Like they have a gross national happiness index. So Bhutan is light years ahead of other countries when it comes to focusing on people's well-being. They have constitutionally protected forests. Like 60% of the country must remain under forest cover. So those are the kind of policies that we need. You asked about green growth and degrowth as well. So degrowth, it actually just suffers from really terrible marketing, because people hear degrowth and because of the connotation that growth is good, they automatically think the degrowth is like people are going to try to take something away from me. What degrowth movement actually talks about, though, if you dig into detail, is like that our material and energy footprint needs to shrink because of ecological overshoot. But that doesn't mean that we necessarily have worse lives, because majority of our well-being depends on relational, how good our relations are, the health of the natural world around us. Right? Like so, it is a trade-off that we make, but because you start with the word degrowth instead of saying that you're focused on human and planetary well-being, it leads to a lot of problems over there. When we talk about green growth, it suffers from that illusion that you can have infinite growth on a finite planet. And it only considers basically carbon emissions as a challenge, right? It does not account for the fact that there are other planetary boundaries that we are going to be breaching. There are some reports which suggest that we might not even have enough minerals to build on generations upon generations of renewables. Like so, that model has a fundamental limit built in, or even if we could, it will take decades before that build out could be complete. We'll not get there in time. So, like, we have no option but to kind of rethink what the focus of our economy should be. And donut economics lays that out very nicely. So that's why that's my favorite framework.
I appreciate that context. You covered a lot of ground there and made excellent points there to hit those other theories or thoughts with their limitations, and offering donut economics as a way to perhaps bring the conversation to its most promising area of exploration. Let's take this conversation. I vision we're on for another 15, 20 minutes before we wrap this up. Let's go dark for a minute, and then let's end on the more positive side of the spectrum. So here's the tough question. If we crash our system through constant failed action, what might that look like?
Yeah, and we covered this a little bit in the beginning. Like it's how this can lead to a collapse of societal order through food scarcity and water scarcity and migration and authoritarianism and so on. But what it will look like in the near term, though, is kind of similar to the things that we have happening right now. It will seem like living conditions are getting a little harder, things are getting a little costlier, people are a little angrier, a little more polarized. We'll have like nationalistic movements happening again. We'll have rising geopolitical tensions. It'll For some time we'll be able to delude ourselves that these are separate problems, like or these will never happen at home. But increasingly, more and more people will kind of get squeezed out of being able to lead a flourishing lives. We're already seeing that today. Most young people cannot afford a home; they're getting crushed under student debt crises. So in Toronto, 10% of the people are now reliant on food banks. There's a city, Kingston, which is just an hour and a half away. There, 1/3 of the people there are reliant on food banks. So more and more people are going to just start falling through the cracks. And then what? So this is probably what the next 3 to 5 years look like. you'll probably have widespread AI and robotics led job losses as well. Um, what happens after that will kind of depend on how much we get our act together in the next 5 to 10 years. Some of these alternatives that I was mentioning, if they scale up sufficiently, if enough of us have done our inner work to kind of break out of these narratives of wealth, power, and status accumulation, uh, then we might be able to hold the line. Things, because of hitting ecological limits, things are bound to get difficult, but they might not be totally catastrophic. But if we waste the time that we have in the next 5 to 10 years, right, like we continue business as usual, yeah, then it's anybody's guess as to how bad it will get. One of my friends asked me like a few days back, like, by when do you think there's like a 50% probability of things going really, really bad? And I didn't quite know how to answer that because we have war in the Middle East, we have war between Russia and Ukraine, we have authoritarianism rising everywhere, like cost of living, like things are already bad, right? Like it just gets a little worse every day. So it's kind of like that frog in boiling water metaphor, right? So it's already way past late that we start acting on it.
Okay, and I'll give a shout out to Lynn, who's listening live with us today. She throws a comment in, 10 principles for transforming economics in a time of global crisis, linked to an article that is inspirational. Could be good reading. So that's a great ad in the comment section.
Yeah.
In terms of okay, so the dark, the dark scenario is very much the boiling pot, the frog in it, leading toward things of shrinking living footprint because things are just less and less affordable. A young generation that struggles with purpose and meaning because of that. The technological boom that may displace more people, particularly knowledge workers, given the potential threat of AI, and all that bringing us to do you have the food, the water? Are you living in a place that has enough capacity for healthy economic social survival, and hence the migrant question comes up, pressing on borders and boundaries for people that are hit later as opposed to areas hit front and center in how a global crisis unfolds. Rioting, civil unrest, those issues. So the dark scenario has enough frightening aspects to it, and Hollywood can make movies that make it look or feel even worse in all coming to a head. Let's flip the script and say, what gives you hope? Give me some light, given where we sit in this metacrisis issue. Take me there.
Yeah. Well, I would say I think we need probably more dystopian sci-fi being painted with credible enough data so that this picture kind of becomes vivid in people's mind, but pair it with hope at the end, like so that people don't fall into despair. And so I love the question of what makes me hopeful. One, I'm not a fortune teller, right? Like everything that I've been sharing is what seems like our default likely trajectory. But we have agency here in terms of what we choose to do. And like I said, there are many people working on these problems, even though they're not covered by the mainstream. So you don't know when the script can flip, right? I take the example of COVID again. When COVID started, I thought we might be in it for a decade. Like my mind painted all kinds of horror scenarios about how bad it will get. But then we had unprecedented global cooperation for the development of the vaccine, and worst of it was kind of over by 1.5 years. So we have the capacity to kind of come together and do the right thing. There's this quote that I like. It says that you can count on humans to do the right thing after they have tried everything else. So
I know that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So we are I think pretty much out of other options. So I'm not reliant on human altruism and the goodness of our nature necessarily. I think it's the constraints of the problem will automatically force a logical solution if people are willing to look at things clearly.
I'll
The other,
pause there.
yeah,
Yeah, pause and hold your thought there. I tend to think it's going to get worse to allow us the choice to make it better. If we're really pressed on some of these calamities, that perhaps then the thinking is, malleable enough that an economic system shift can start to enter the narrative story, and ultimately the power system. A political shift can happen. The political economy. If both pieces start to move under crisis scenarios, new imagination may kick in that starts to allow us, not stuck in root cause, bad incentives, but starting to realign systems for flourishing. So continue your list of hopeful things.
yeah. No, I'm with you 100% on this, that the crisis can be a time of great opportunity. And if we have these alternatives at that time, the status quo is malleable. At this time, the conversations about alternate economies or some of these solutions of bioregionalism or digital democracies, these can seem far-fetched. Uh, what we don't realize is that everything around us is a human invention. Like even the concept of a country which we take for granted, like that's probably like 500 years old. Right? Like we built all this, and we can rebuild when we realize that something better is required. So, I put a lot of faith in human ingenuity. I also put a lot of faith in our resilience. So I recently read that around 900,000 years ago, like in one of the ice ages, we were down to about 1,300 people. Uh, and, we stayed at that population level for about 100,000 years. We managed to come out of that. Right? So I don't think this is the case of, humanity is going to go extinct or something of that sort. But we do need to get our act together to avoid suffering for millions.
Excellent. You want to give me anything more in the hope bucket before I jump to a few final questions?
So the other thing I would say is that there'll be a lot of the systems that we have today, they can seem very entrenched, but systems which are incompatible with our ecological realities or which don't serve the people, they are self-terminating. So, we don't need to kind of give into despair thinking about how powerful incumbent structures are. A lot of what has kept these incumbent structures in power was that things were at least working really well for 10 to 15% of the population earlier. Right? So, and right now what has happened is that they've stopped working well for 99% of the population. So earlier, let's say, I don't believe in, rich versus poor and, elites versus the others conversation. But if you had this view that the 1% were kind of controlling the rest and they were keeping this unjust system in place, they were dependent on the remaining 10 to 15% to serve as the next layer, which would kind of operationalize everything. But now those people are going to shift out of the system as well because it doesn't serve them either, right? And they're smart enough, educated enough to be able to build the alternatives. But again, I want to stress that I don't think of it as a top versus bottom issue. I feel like we are all part of the system. We are all acting on these incentives. We are all good and bad. But yeah, it's not working for the majority now, and so it will change. Power resides where we believe it resides, and we have the power to change it as well.
All right, thank you for that. Shout out again to Nishan and Lynn for more comments in the live stream section and links to things that you find useful based on the things that we're talking about here for Akil and myself. Let me ask one more question before we do final thoughts. Action is how we feel useful, how we make sense and meaning of the world, and feeling productive, and our contribution to what's going on in life around us. What can we do? What can people do in light of this meta crisis moment?
Yeah. I mean, I can kind of just mirror what my own journey has been, right? Uh, First is just to educate yourself. These problems are large and complex. They require uh, weeks and months and years of study to kind of start wrapping our heads around. Luckily, there are some great people who have synthesized a lot of these challenges and turned them into relatively simple language. Nate Higgins, Daniel Schmachtenberger. You'll find great videos from them on YouTube. Just go follow some of these people. Or like you and I can link to some resources, into the email that you send after this, which would be a good starting point. So awareness and education, I think, is the first step. Um, Second, I would say get an app blocker for your phone. Social media is not making any of us happy. It's destroying our attention spans. It's polarizing us. So
I'll repeat that. You said an app blocker for all the apps on your phone. Use technology to barricade parts of your technology or to gatekeep it. Keep going.
yeah, absolutely. So like we should not be slaves to our technology. It should be a slave to us. Um, and then that third thing I would say is, again, heal your inner narratives. Like, if you are carrying the dominant narrative that power is the only truth and life is a competition, then like that narrative needs to change. We are a cooperative social species. We have the capacity to do great good. So once we heal our trauma, like, we can come together. So that would be the third thing I would say. Uh, Fourth thing, it's not going to be possible for everybody, but if it's possible for you, then change the work that you're doing to directly work on these problems if you can. Like, work on climate change or AI safety or whatever issue, depolarization, if that is what appeals to you. Uh, if you can't do it like as part of a core job, do it after your office hours, right? But find a way to kind of like dedicate your time to this problem. That is the most valuable resource. And also, if others see you acting on the problems, it's going to start a social movement, and we need more and more people joining into doing this. Uh, then I would say, don't worry about the global picture. Like, if you have the wherewithal to do it, like, great, but otherwise, start acting locally. Uh, the last thing I would say is just believe, right? Like the solutions are out there. Once you kind of start educating yourself, you'll find that they're there. Once you start meeting other people, it's going to give you a lot more hope. Like, initially, these conversations can sound a lot like doom and gloom. But once you kind of accept the reality of this is where we are, it becomes a very empowering place, and you meet others who are working on this, and it actually makes you very hopeful and alive. So just believe that it's not as dark as it seems at first glance.
I feel incredibly lucky to be alive right now. To have experienced everything that's happened in a half century, part of my lifetime, 5 decades. I know I live in an incredible place in the United States, and I want it to do well. I want other places to equally do well. There's so much inequality around the globe. We can do so much better to raise the floor of dignity and to let human flourishing happen in a way that is sustainable, that's, in boundary, shall we say, for what life on Earth means. Uh, great, great list of 5, things on what people can do. I encourage people to, follow somebody, find a way to incorporate some of these thoughts into, projects that you choose to work on in the volunteer space, or should you feel professionally called to get in and make something happen, go do it. Akil, it's been a joy building a friendship with you through Substack. You are a Substack friend. We've never met in person. Someday I hope we have that opportunity. One of us will have to cross the border with a passport to make that happen. It's a global interconnected world, and this is evidence of it. I want to offer you a chance for some final thoughts. This has been a joyful conversation to hear, your journey and the way you've synthesized so many of these things that pertain to the metacrisis and the root causes in our systems that are leading to the challenging moments that we're facing. Yeah, give us some final parting thoughts before we break, for the day.
Yeah. So, thank you so much for suggesting that we do this. It's an absolute pleasure, and like I said, it's a part of the testament of the sorry, it's a testament to the power of the internet. And yeah, I look forward to welcoming you in Toronto. I think there might be challenges in me crossing the border. um, yeah, in terms of final thoughts, I love what you said, that it is actually a great time to be alive, and that can sound strange, given the crises and the context that we find ourselves in. Um, but I think the reason for that is, one core part of the crisis that we are facing is like a crisis of meaning and purpose, and connection. And these crises give us a great opportunity to lead a very purposeful and meaningful life. Uh, as much as I wish that the world was not in this state, uh, I cannot imagine a more thrilling thing to work on. Like, we have the opportunity to reimagine what human civilization should look like, what our relationship to rest of life should look like. Uh, I think it is like the most fascinating and life affirming work anybody can do, and like the best thing they could be doing with their limited time over here. Uh, so yeah, like I said, once you get past the despair, it is an absolutely fantastic place to be. Um, the other thing I would say is that if you're not the hoping kind, or if if this doesn't cut, like my spiel of this being exciting and life affirming doesn't cut it, uh, and you feel like we are all doomed, and death is coming for all of us. I would say death is coming for all of us regardless. None of us live forever. So the only question we can answer is, what should we do with our limited time over here? So if nothing else, I'm at least optimizing for dying peacefully. So here we are.
There we are. Make the most of your time. Choose wisely. Make friends. Hug the people you love. Share gratitude. Basics go a long way in our as a human species with our important social dynamics and relationships, and these big problems that affect our structures and our environment and our capacity to live well. We can find problems, and we can find solutions to the problems we have, and we can start locally and scale them up to the point where the impact becomes truly phenomenal for what's possible here on planet Earth. So I'm going to go with optimism. I'm leaving on a or as Nishan says, optimistic nihilism. I'm optimistically purposeful. We've got a shot at doing some big things. And
I believe so. I absolutely believe so. And the 29 people that we have live with us right now, they make me believe so as well. So
we're grateful to everyone who's tuned in today for our lunchtime or mid-afternoon conversation about the Metacrisis. Akhil Puri with the Substack How Shall We Live? I'm Joe Cook with Just Citizens. It's been a great afternoon, and we'll do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joe. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure has been mine as well. Signing off now. Bye-bye.